Well, hey everyone, I want to take a moment and welcome you to the podcast. If this is your first time coming across our podcast, if this is it's been a little bit or something like that, however that works out for you. But we are in a series called Shining Light, and we are journeying through the Gospel of John. And we've been doing this since the beginning of last year. And so we've just been going section by section, verse by verse through the Gospel of John, and we've just been trekking along there. We've taken breaks along the way. And so if this is your first time catching us, I encourage you to go over to thepointofocus.com where you can find the Shining Light series episodes, where you can go through the Gospel of John. You can pick up where you left off. You can start back at the beginning. However you want to do that. There's a playlist on the YouTube channel that just lists them all there in a row. They are typically titled with the verse reference, so they're kind of easy to find. If they were kind of broken up, as I said, we've taken breaks. We've done some different series along the way, and so as we are continuing on in this series, we are going to be looking at John 9 in its entirety. So once again, this is kind of like if you're catching us for the first time, this is kind of going to be a little bit of a different episode that we've done in this series. We are just typically we kind of look at a section and then we read it and we talk about it. So today it's kind of going to be the same thing. It's going to feel a little different. We're going to read the entirety of the story. It's one story that's being dealt with here, but there's one kind of major thing that Jesus wants us to get out of this, that Jesus shines light on, that we're gonna talk about, as well as so it's not going to be as deep of a dive that we normally do, but we're still going to journey through this story. We're going to see a lot of similarities. We're going to see a lot of similar things being said, especially when it goes back to John 5, and we see a similar kind of situation happen. And so, with that being said, I want to encourage you, if you have a copy of the Bible, whether it's paper or electronic, you can open it on up to John chapter 9, and that's where we're going to be. And just a word of note here, too, that this is the sixth of the 7 signs. So in the Gospel of John, there are 7 signs and wonders, 7 miracles, if you will, of what Jesus does to kind of shine light on himself. There's also 7 I am statements, which we're going to pick up on when we get into John 10. We're going to see a couple more of those I am statements. But this one is the sixth of those 7 signs. And so the other ones were in John 2, when Jesus turned water into wine. In John 4, when he healed the official son. In John 5, when he healed the lame man at the pool of Bethesda. Then 2 in John chapter 6, with the feeding of the 5,000, and when Jesus walks on water. And then this one here in John 9, the healing of the man born blind. And so that's where we are here. And this is just kind of just continuing on in the story. So we just spent 2 chapters worth of time talking about this, with Jesus talking with the Pharisees and the religious leaders and things like that, and them questioning him and challenging him and all these things like that. And then it was briefly... Then they kind of went home, and then the story kind of continues. And then there's the woman caught in adultery kind of interrupts the teaching proceedings and things like that. And then Jesus continues on through the rest of John 8. And so we've just been going on through this kind of continuous story here in the Gospel of John. So if you're at John chapter 9, we are going to start at the beginning. And as I said, we are going to read the story, and then we'll just kind of talk about it in a little bit of a different way than we normally do, with the focus kind of being on the first 12 or so with it being on the initial sign that Jesus did, the healing of the blind man, and then we're gonna just kind of focus in on that and what Jesus has to say. So, John chapter 9, verse 1, it says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or the parents' sins? It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the task assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. Then he spit on the ground and made mud with his saliva and spread the mud over the man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit by and beg? And some said he was, and others said, no, it's just a man that looks like him. But the beggar says, yes, I am the same one. They asked, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me to go wash in the pool of Siloam. Go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went, washed, and now I can see. Well, where is he now? They asked. I don't know, he replied. They took the man who had been born blind to the Pharisees, because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made mud and healed him. The Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he put mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man Jesus is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath. Others said, but how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was deep division among them. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what is your opinion about this man who healed you? The man replied, I think he must be a prophet. The Jewish leaders still refused to believe that the man had been blind and could now see. So they called his parents. They asked him, is this your son? Was he born blind? If so, how can he now see? His parents replied, we know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why they said, he's old enough, ask him. So for the second time, they called the man who had been born blind and told him, God should get the glory for this. God should get the glory for this because we know this man, Jesus, is a sinner. Well, I don't know whether he's a sinner, or I don't know whether he is a sinner, the man replied, but I know this. I was blind, and now I can see. But what did he do? They asked. How did he heal you? Look, the man exclaimed, I have told you once. Did you not listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to hear it from his disciples too? Then they cursed him and said, You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from. Why, that's very strange, the man replied. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not have done it. You were born a total sinner, they answered, and now you're trying to teach us? You were born a total sinner, they answered. Are you trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. When Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked, Do you believe in the Son of Man? The man answered, Who is he, sir? I want to believe in him. You have seen him, and he is speaking to you." Jesus replied. "Yes, Lord, I believe," the man said, and he worshipped Jesus. Then Jesus told him, I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and show those who think they see that they are blind." Some of the Pharisees were standing nearby and heard him and asked, "Are you saying that we're blind?" "If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty," Jesus replied. "But you remain guilty because you claim to see." So there's a lot going on in this whole story. It's crazy it's a crazy story, but there's a clear cut path that Jesus has for us in this. And so this story, Jesus said that the man's blindness was essentially a birth defect. It was not caused by a specific sin or his parents or whatever. Speaking to the man's situation, Jesus told that even his blindness was a plan for God, so the works of God should be revealed in him. So this was all a part of God's plan. Jesus was doing these different miracles and these different signs and these different wonders so people would know him, so people would see him, so God would be glorified. And so these things were just meant for to shine light on Jesus. Like in reality, it was made so people would point people to God, would point people to Jesus and who he was and what he was doing and what he was about. Jesus once again says that he is the light of the world. So he's rephrasing that from the previous chapter. And a couple things that stand out here, okay, is Jesus used different methods in his miracles. Jesus as God used the dust of the ground into work of clay. So Jesus did a work of creation with dust and clay for this man. Jesus found it important to change his methods of healing so no one could ever make a formula of his methods. The power was in God, not a method. So Jesus does the same in our lives. This is one of the things that I get out of this story, is Jesus does the same in our lives. He'll come to us. He'll come and he'll do something for us in our life. But he doesn't do it the same way twice. He doesn't help us with certain areas of our life, money or whatever it is, right? He may answer some of our financial needs or our health needs or our spiritual needs or our family's needs or our personal needs. He may answer those things in a certain way, and then the next time he's not going to do it in the same way. And this leads to possibly frustration in our own life, because Jesus came to us one time, so we pray and we're like, oh, he'll come in, but he's not doing it the way we perceive him to do it. Jesus could have healed this man in multiple different ways, but Jesus changed up his way of doing things so that nobody would go, okay, if I just look at this and if I just do this way, then that Jesus is going to come through. Like if I just do this and I pray this way and Jesus is going to show up just like he did the last time. That's not the way Jesus does it. This is the Jesus so we rely on him, so we trust him, so we depend on him. Jesus did the same thing with Israel back in when they leave Egypt. Moses brings water from a rock, and then God wants to do it a different way, but Moses does it the same way, and it cost him the promised land. There's multiple different things that Jesus does throughout his ministry that God does with Israel. If you look in the Old Testament, where he does things one way, and then the next time he does it another way, because he's not going to do it the same way twice. One of those is when he crosses the Red Sea, he splits it in half and they walk through on dry ground. But when they cross the Jordan River, he does it a little bit different. So it's not the same way. And Jesus is the same way in our life. That's what I believe Jesus wants us to hear, is that he does work in our life. He will come to our, he's a part of our life. He's there and he wants what's best for us in all of that. But we have to just fully trust Jesus, fully have faith in Jesus, because that's how we're going to see the things that he's going to do. Because if we put blinders on and we just look, so any of the blind men are now going to be like, okay, so if I just wait for mud to be put on my eyes, then I'm going to be able to see. But Jesus could come up to them and say something totally different to them, and they could miss what he's doing. Just like we miss what he's doing if we're so focused in one thing. Then we're getting mad at Jesus and we're like, hey, he's not doing anything. He's not working in our life. He's not doing it. But in reality, he's doing it over here. We're just missing it because we're focused in one way. One of the things that also comes out of here is, in this miracle, Jesus took the initiative. Jesus came to the man. But Jesus expected the man to respond with faith. This would not have happened if the man didn't take and do his part. So what I mean by that is Jesus expects us to do the same as well. Jesus came to us. John 1:14 tells us that Jesus came and he dwelt among us. He came to be with us. He came for us and all of that. But we have to do our part. Sometimes Jesus coming through in our life is us taking a step that we know is right. Oh, we can sit and we're like, Jesus just isn't answering. He's not, but he's given us a clear thing. Oh, but I don't want to do that. Like, it's shown up recently in my own life, in my family. Like, my wife didn't want to do something, but it was all a setup for God later. There was a change in her job. She was really mad about it. She wanted to quit. She wanted all of this stuff like that. But now here, just at the time of this recording, just a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, she was offered a new position in a job that actually required her to have the experience that she spent the last year obtaining. But she didn't want to do it, but she took the step. She did what was right. And now God revealed to her through this new position that it was all part of the plan. And had she left that, she may not have been where she needed to be. She may not have been getting the experience that she needed to get. And the same is true for other aspects of our life. We may not be getting the results that we want, but God has given us a clear step. Her step was stay put, don't leave, don't run, like all of that. And she could have quit. She could have done it, but she listened. She took that step and she stayed, even though she really wasn't what she wanted to do, even though it really wasn't what. And that's what Jesus says here for us in this story. Jesus tells us to take a step. But it's like, I don't know about that. That's uncomfortable. I don't know if I want to do that or not. But then we just sit. I'm like, well, I prayed to God 3 years ago for this, and it's just not working. The pastors around my church say, well, what was the next thing that God said to do? And then do that. Because God is waiting for you to do that. So then that way, he can move in your life. He doesn't want to take you from point A to point B. He could have taken Israel right to the promised land, but he didn't want to do that. Jesus could have just snapped his fingers and this man would have been healed. But he didn't want to do that because it's about relationship. It's about the trust and faith that we have in Jesus, that he's going to do what he said. He's going to be where he says he's going to be. He's going to be a part of our life. He's worthy of our trust. So in this story, the man was a similar thing. Jesus didn't say, hey, go wash your eyes and you'll be able to see. This took a step of faith He didn't know what was going to happen. He could have just sat there with mud on his eyes and it wouldn't have mattered. Like, it didn't matter. Like, well, he just put mud on my face and then told me to go wash it off. What's that going to do? What's the point of that? And so this man was responding in an act of faith and in a step of faith. And he went and he washed his eyes and he could see. Had he not done that, he'd still be sitting, he would have sat there with mud in his eyes. Still unable to see, still unable to think, until he went and washed. There was no, like me just sitting here thinking, like, there was no timeline on it. It didn't say you've got 5 days to go do this, or 30 seconds, or whatever. Any time after Jesus said, go and wash, that man would have been healed. Whether it took him 3 days to do it, whether it took him 5 years to do it, whether it took him 20 seconds. He would have eventually been healed because Jesus said, hey, go wash. That miracle, there was no expiration date. Something that I just thought about. It's not explicitly said in the text, but Jesus would have healed that mud that Jesus put on from the touch of Jesus would have healed the man whenever he decided to take that step. And so that's where we are at in the story. And we see in the rest of the story, we see once again the Pharisees are still battling this idea with their main blindness wasn't that they didn't know. Their main blindness was they were so enraged by Jesus. They were so upset at what he was doing. They were so just out to get him that they were blind. And they were refusing to see. They were refusing to listen and all of that. Because as we see in the rest of the story, they were trying to get somebody because of their main agenda, their main purpose, their main point was to find something so they could arrest Jesus, to find something so they could get Jesus. We got him. Yes, he said this or he did this or whatever. This is the second time he healed on the Sabbath. Back in John chapter 5, we had that whole chapter and that whole conversation there because he healed the man by the pool of Bethesda and got up and walked, and you can telling him to carry all this stuff like that. So we've already had a conversation. So it just keeps circling back with the Pharisees here and the religious leaders because they're sitting here and they're like, he healed on the Sabbath. This man's a sinner. We don't do work on the Sabbath. And the man was just simple like, I don't know anything about any of that, but I do know that I was blind and now I can see. He could see clearly. He understood. He could see what was going on. And even at the end of the Pharisees were like, "Are you saying that we're blind?" Because Jesus is talking about that kind of blindness. They were so opposed. They were not willing to change their heart. Last week we talked about there was no room in their heart for his message. And there's still no room in their heart because he's changing up the way things are. Like, he must not have read the Bible. He's a sinner. He's telling people to healing them on the Sabbath, making them carry their mat, and telling them to go wash. Like, you can't do that. It's the Sabbath. So they're still stuck in that same rhythm, the same place that they had been, and that they're going to continue to be throughout. And it's going to get worse, really. But that's what happened. They're so trying to get somebody to tell them something so they can arrest Jesus that they drug the man. They asked the man twice. The man was finally annoyed with it and was like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to keep answering your questions. I've already told you what happened. I've told you twice. And then they call in his parents. Like, is this your kid? Like, what's he like? All this stuff like that. Because they were just trying so desperately to get Jesus so they could arrest him, so they could kill him, so they could move on and get things restored, because Jesus was upsetting the system. Jesus was upsetting their way of things. Jesus was upsetting everything that they had taught, everything they had built, everything. Jesus was upsetting that whole thing. But one thing is true from the story. The one thing that the man knew, when we get pulled out of darkness into the light of Jesus, when we get pulled out of all of that, one thing is true, is that we were blind and now we see. You see, the thing is we're all born blind. We're all born blind of the fact that we need Jesus, that Jesus is the one that provides true satisfaction, true love, true joy, true happiness, and all of those things. Jesus is the only one, but we're all born blind. We all need Jesus to open that blindness, to open our hearts, to open our eyes, so that we can now say that we can see. And the thing is that Jesus came to you. Jesus came to me. And he's just waiting for us to take a step. He's waiting for us so he can open our eyes, so he can show us true satisfaction, so he can give us true peace, true love, true happiness, true joy, all of those things. Because otherwise, it's just momentary. Life will give you moments of happiness, moments of peace, moments of love, moments of joy. But there's nothing as sustaining as the true satisfaction in life that comes when Jesus is a part of it. So just like this man had to take a step, you can know all that you want to know about Jesus. You can know everything. You can know the Bible cover to cover. The Pharisees did. The Pharisees knew everything they needed to know about the Bible. They also knew about Jesus. They knew everything they could. But if you don't have Jesus, it really doesn't matter. Because the Pharisees were more blind than anybody else. But they knew Jesus. They were in the synagogues. They were teaching. They were doing all of these things. They knew the Bible. But they didn't know Jesus. They were still blind. Jesus is waiting at the door. We've been using that analogy this year. Revelation 3:20, it says, "Look, I stand at the door and knock. If you open the door, I will come in." He stands at the door and he knocks. And he's waiting for us to open the door. He's waiting for you to open the door. He's waiting for you to take the step to open the door, to get the mud out of your eyes. That's what he's waiting for. Jesus isn't going to bum rush you. He's not going to barge in. Jesus only comes when he's invited in. So, with that being said, I want to offer this prayer for you that you can pray along with me. It's one of those, you just repeat after me, and then I'll have some next steps. Are you willing to open the door to let Jesus in? It's as simple as that. It's not complicated. It's really not. This man believed in Jesus after he just did what Jesus asked him to do. Hey, go wash. And he did. And then he came back and was like, I want to believe. And that's all it takes. Is belief in Jesus. Proclaiming that. That's all it takes. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Everybody who believes that Jesus is Lord and that God raised him from the dead you will be saved. Romans 10:9 and 13, what I just referenced there. So, are you going to open the door? Right now, here's an opportunity to open the door, to make room in your heart for Jesus, so he can fill that Jesus-shaped hole that can only be filled by Jesus. We can try and cram all sorts of stuff in it, but it can only be filled by Jesus. If you want to do that, I want you to pray this with me. Dear Jesus, I am a sinner. I believe that you died and rose from the dead to save me from my sins. I want to be with you in heaven forever. Jesus, forgive me of all my sins. I open my heart to you now and ask you to come into my heart as my personal Lord and Savior. In Jesus' name, amen. So if you prayed that prayer, if you did that, if you took that step, if you opened the door, if you made room in your heart for Jesus, I got some next steps for you. Now tell somebody about it. Tell your family, tell your friends, get plugged into a local church so that way they can come alongside you and help you. Ecclesiastes 4 tells us that 2 people are better than 1, 3 are even better. And throughout that passage, it says, if somebody falls in the wilderness and they're alone, who's there to help them? If 2 people can face combat better, and all these different things. And so the Bible tells us that we're in a war, but it's not against all the other people. It's against whether or not you're going to open the door. It's against Ephesians tells us that it's against the spiritual things. It's against the different aspects of spiritual warfare. And we need help with that. We need to be together with that. We need to be equipped for that. Ephesians 6 gives us the armor of God and what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to battle this thing. But we can't do it alone. So we need to be involved. So you need to get plugged into a local church so that you can have these people in, so they can equip you, so they can train you, so they can teach you, so they can help you. That's what the church is. And so I encourage you to get plugged in to a local church. And then also I encourage you to start reading the Gospels. Start reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and just start getting to know all you can about Jesus. Because that's what's important. Jesus is your life. Jesus is why we have life, by the power of his name. So everything that we have, everything that we need, everything that we do comes through Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We're currently going through John. John kind of just shines light on who Jesus is by him doing miracles and different things like that. Matthew is the teaching of Jesus. We got the parables, the Sermon on the Mount, all those kinds of things there in Matthew. And then Mark and Luke also tell different elements of Jesus' life. And then continue reading in the New Testament. Just continue on. Just get to know all you can about the Bible. And so, with that being said, I welcome you and I encourage you into this journey with Jesus. It's not going to be easy. Our theme verse for this year is, I told you these things, like in this world you will have trouble. I've told you these things so that you will have peace. Jesus never promises an easy life. So, with that being said, I encourage you to just dive in, get to know all you can about Jesus, find a local church, find podcasts, find different things that you can do to help just start building your relationship. And when I say read the Bible, just read the Bible, jot down some questions, just read it and let God talk to you. It's not about knowing what every little aspect means. It's about finding a translation that works for you and just diving into the Bible, jotting down questions and having conversations later, but just letting God talk to you. That's what's important when it comes to the Bible. And growth will happen with that. Wanting to go deeper will happen as you do that. So, I encourage you with that. I also encourage you to come back and join us next week as we start a new series called At the Movies. This is something I've been geared up for. This is something I've been excited for. And it's kind of going to tie into a lot of what we've been talking about here. But I'm just really, really excited for this round of At the Movies. And I think it's going to be good for all of us to see. And then after that, we're going to jump right back into Shining Light. And so, as I said, we're on track to, as the way things are currently panned out, by just before Christmas, we'll be able to finish the Gospel of John. And then in 2027, we're going to be moving on. But I'm excited for what God has for us the remainder of this summer, especially as we dive into this At the Movies series. And so I hope to see you then. I hope you'll come back next week for At the Movies as we kick off with a very familiar movie to most of us probably. And so I'm excited. So I hope to see you next week.